Good morning, everybody. No, do not adjust your sets. This is Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. She's the House Democratic leader. And she's going to explain for me what a wrap-up smear is. And why is this important? This is how they merchandise propaganda. This is how they merchandise the narrative that they want to sell. If this is a political tactic, it's a well-known political tactic. And Mrs. Pelosi, outlines it very, very clearly here. Have a listen. Here we go.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this, so they have that validation that the press...
The you that she's talking to there, she's speaking to reporters. So she says, you write it and validate what the smear is, right? It's incredible. She's talking to them like, this is, you guys write it and validate it for me.
Press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic, and it's self-evident. But I think I'm worth the trouble.
So what she's describing is how to smear an opponent, but it's also how propaganda is shopped. And I'm going to show you an example of exactly that thing. This is how they push it, right? This is how they say, this is popular. This is something being talked about. This is being talked about in big circles. Here's CTV News reporting on December 17th. That's yesterday. Should Canadians carry a carbon card loaded with a year's worth of points? Now, first I want to point out, you don't get your salary paid in years. Right? You don't get all of your salary paid at January 1st, right? So distributing it that way would be not a great idea. Monthly would be better, but still, you don't get paid monthly. I used to get paid monthly. It's really difficult to make it last. Right. That's the point. Here's the article. Imagine if tucked between your debit card and credit card, your wallet had another piece of plastic. A points card designed to save the planet as you use it. Hold on a second. Let me just ask Google, what is plastic made of, Google? Boop, 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 boop. That's Google working clearly. And here's the answer. It says plastics are made from, it doesn't say oil, not yet. It says natural materials such as cellulose, coal, natural gas, salt, and crude oil through a whatever, it doesn't matter. Crude oil is there. So we're going to put some oil in your wallet, and you're going to use that oil in your wallet to save the planet. What idiots. I mean, do they think we're this stupid? They do think we're this stupid. And most people would just carry on because that's what you use to pay for things. Cards in your wallet, right? Cards made of carbon, cards made of oil. Back to this. Loaded with a year's worth of points, your carbon card would need to be presented to buy a pound of steak from the butcher, a flight to Mexico, a tank of gas. Mexico? You think you're going to Mexico on a plane? Oh, you sorry reporter. You don't realize they're targeting you too, Graham. You're not going to fly to Mexico. You're not going to have enough points after the first couple of years to afford all of the gas for the year. You're not going to be able to afford a flight to Mexico with your carbon credits, man. Sorry about your luck. You're staying in Ontario. You're not even going to be able to afford to drive to Saskatchewan. Like, wake up, buddy. Okay, back to this. A tank of gas, anything that adds emissions to the atmosphere and contributes to climate change. Your annual points limit would be determined through a variety of factors, such as access to public transit or geography. A lobster fisherman in Nova Scotia who needs gas to power his boat would have more points than, say, a barista in downtown Toronto with access to public transit. Oh, think about this. Do you trust the federal government to manage a point system? If you're a fisherman in Nova Scotia and you know that the federal government is saying, well, the barista needs 6. What do you think the fisherman in Nova Scotia needs? Let's give him 8. Yeah, that's more than 6. Right. Great. And that'll make our carbon credits work. And then Ontario and Quebec will re-elect a Liberal government. Unbelievable. Just makes me so mad. Like, do you want the federal government, the central government, to set the carbon credits? This is a terrible, awful idea. This is a bad idea because rationing in the First and the Second World War was done so we could send food to Britain. Rationing in Britain was done because without it, they would starve. That is not the case now. And they're trying to shoehorn this by saying, the scarcity isn't in the food, it's in the production, right? We can't afford the carbon to produce the food, and so will continue to produce the food, but you need to pay carbon tax credits. It is a scam. It is a scam, and it won't do a damn thing to reduce emissions, period. Look at British Columbia. They've had a carbon tax for 10 years, and it hasn't done anything. Nothing. This is a scam. This is just out and out theft. Back to this. Your annual points limit would be determined through a variety of factors, blah, blah, blah. Okay. If you run out of points before the year's end, you could buy more from someone with extra points to spare, a financial reward for going green. Okay. It says the idea was floated in a recent Globe and Mail article. Okay. Here's the opinion piece. I talked about it the other day. The climate crisis is like a world war. So let's talk about rationing. In this piece, at the beginning, they say voluntary measures just can't deliver when the problem is this big and time so short. That's why it may be time for mandatory cutbacks on the kinds of consumption that threaten all of us, right? Some environmental activists and leaders suggest we should practice moderation, take the bus, eat veggie burgers, but that's not enough. That's not enough, says this article. And then it goes on to say for allocating stuff, our usual mechanism is price. If you want something and can afford it, generally you can have it, but that's no way to reduce activities that generate emissions. Even though sin taxes on meat or carbon taxes on gas may lower some emissions, they don't restrain wealthy people who like to fly and eat steak and barely notice the expense. So higher prices don't achieve the limitations we need on greenhouse gases. They're also inequitable and unfair. So they're saying rich people can afford to just buy, even with a carbon tax. We need to create an entirely new economy where everybody's equal. Everybody gets the same amount of carbon taxes, and then those rich people can't get around it. Except, here's this. How would the rationing work? There are numerous possible models. Carbon could be a kind of currency that we spend along with regular money. We're purchasing high emission goods or services. When purchasing high emission goods or services. Each of us could receive an allocation of carbon points to spend in a month or year. These could be stored on a smart bank card like plastic. When paying for gasoline or airline tickets or certain foods, or more broadly energy use, the card would electronically deduct money plus appropriate numbers of carbon points. If we used our entire allocation, we might be able to purchase more. There are pros and cons to tradability, from individuals who don't need them, rewarding them financially for their low carbon lives. Prices of goods such as meat would not necessarily rise, rather everyone would only be allowed to purchase certain amounts. This is saying rich people will be able to afford to purchase extra carbon from people who don't need their carbon. It is disingenuous to say out of one side of your mouth, those terrible rich people, we can't expect these rations to affect them because they're so rich they can just purchase their way out of it. We need to create an entirely new economy, and then say, oh yeah, but you can use your money though to purchase from this new economy, from this carbon economy. Use your regular money to purchase from other people who don't use their carbon or don't need it, or have children and can sell theirs, right? Oh, you don't need your carbon, Timmy, you don't need to go on that school trip. I'm going to sell it to this guy. He's going to give me $1,000 for it. So sorry, you're not going on your school trip, buddy. Can't afford that bus carbon. It's insidious and evil and shouldn't be floated. They use the rap smear. This was the first article, right? This was published on the 16th. I want to say maybe earlier, maybe the 17th. Which date? 14th of December. Second article, rap smear, right? It wasn't us. It was these guys. And they pointed another article. It was also floated by British MPs in early 2006. There's an article about that too, and I'll get to that in just a minute. In fact, right now. Back to the article. Boyle didn't invent the idea. 11 years ago, a group of British MPs floated the idea of citizens carrying around carbon cards loaded with points. At the time, Britain's Environment Minister praised the idea as having potential, but said it was ahead of its time. It was eventually shelved. Could it work? I scroll down. Some environmental experts are at best skeptical of the idea. Jessica Green, an associated professor of political science at the University of Toronto who has written extensively on environmental politics, called the idea of a carbon point system, quote, a political loser over and over again. Oh, wow, at least she realizes it. Back to this. Worse, she said it would unfairly put the onus on everyday citizens to tackle climate change rather than big corporations. They use the opportunity to demonize corporations. Yeah, we shouldn't have to deal with it. It'll be the big corporations. Who do the big corporations sell to? Right, if their production is increased by $100, who do you think is paying for that? You are, through increased prices. Back to this. Simply put, Green says, it's not going to fix the problem. Nope. Steve Easterbrook, a director of the University of Toronto's School of the Environment, said rationing, quote, in some form or another is inevitable because today's solutions, such as the carbon tax and emissions trading schemes, don't go far enough to adequately curb emissions. So he's setting the rules here, saying that eventually we're going to have to do it. But he says, given the political battles over federal carbon tax, it's hard to imagine that voters in Canada would willingly accept rationing until a lot more people experience the impacts of climate change, he said. People need to see that rationing is in support of a massive effort on all fronts. So you can't just introduce rationing and expect people to go along with it. What we really need is a government willing to make the massive investment in clean energy infrastructure that would create jobs and boost the economy in the process. Rationing comes later. And I've said this before, if you have an important piece of infrastructure like a bridge, you know, for people who are commuting, you don't blow up and you need to replace it. You don't blow up the bridge and say, bridge will be out for 6 to 8 weeks. I hope you find another job or your boss doesn't get mad that you're not going to be there, right? You build another bridge instead. You put the other bridge in service and then you fix the first bridge. That's how you build a bridge when you have to do repairs on the other one or fix a bridge or whatever. And this is the same kind of thing. Alberta is an important piece of the Canadian economy landscape. And you don't blow that up without having another bridge built. And if this green economy just takes money, well, it doesn't seem to matter. We being Canada, seem to be sending billions of dollars to third world countries and not batting an eye. So if it's just money, print all the money you want and build a new Alberta, because the idea is Alberta has returns, right? If you invest $1 in Alberta, you get, I don't know what the figure is right now. Let's say 2 back or 4 back. It used to be 10 back, right? But now it's less. But fundamentally, if the green solutions don't do that, the green solutions are failures, right? So, and if the rationing that they want to implement in Canada is not happening anywhere else in the world, pretty quickly, Canadians are going to wake up and say, we're 1.6% of the world's emissions, and we're the only ones being rationed? And why is the UN getting all of our taxpayer money? And it seems like all they're doing with it is, well, I'll show you in just a minute. The end of this article is, systems like rationing are a form of collective action. As well, they give individuals a way of participating in this grand project that we all have, she said. What I'm saying is, let's put big ideas on the table. Let's talk about some really broad and wide-scale actions that we might consider. Yeah, but rationing is not a good idea. Not at all. Here's the British article. I'm not going to go through it. But here's where the money is going. This is from 2018. It says, Canada experimenting with new approach to foreign aid, giving cash directly to poor people. Tens of millions of dollars distributed through direct cash transfers in the past 3 years, 2015 to 2018. And I'm not going to go through this article, but isn't it interesting? We've got all this money, but we can't seem to start that green, boon that has been promised since 2015. Where is it? Where is it? Here's the National Post reporting an update on the carbon tax. Thanks, Justin Trudeau. Federal government reduces carbon tax rate amounts in dissenting provinces. The federal government has decreased the carbon tax rebates Canadians can expect in the new year in 3 provinces that have not adopted carbon pricing models that meet federal requirements. The government has also added Alberta to the mix after the province's United Conservative Party repealed the previous government's consumer carbon tax. The biggest drop in the rebate will be in Saskatchewan, where the federal finance department says a family of 4 will qualify for rebates totaling $809 in 2020, down from $903 that was projected last year. In Ontario, the rebate for a family of 4 has been set at $448, down from $451, while farmers in Manitoba will receive $486, a decrease from $499. So can you wait until you're waiting with bated breath until they load your plastic carbon credit card with your carbon credits at the beginning of the year, and then you find out, we're going to take off 30%. Ha! Welcome to Canada. You thought you were getting a tax rebate. Turns out your tax rebate is being reduced, and it's only been in action for a year. Yeah, we need that money though, right? To fight climate change. How? How many pounds of CO2 have you removed from the atmosphere with your fighting climate change? Because it seems like all you do is take money in and then give it back to people, but less the bureaucracy. So skim 10 to 15% off the top, but pretty soon it'll be 10 to 30%, and then 30 to 50%. And then you're racist if you complain about paying the carbon tax. Don't you know we're saving the planet? Ridiculous. This is the last story for the morning. Laurie Goldstein is saying, it's almost as if Canada is now being led by Prime Minister Chauncey Gardner. Asked to define the middle class, Trudeau says, Canadians know. No, we don't. And I've talked about this before. If you have a single mother and she's got a good job, so she's making $80,000 in a year and 2 kids, well, maybe that's not middle class. Maybe that's more struggling than middle class, right? And if you have two people who make $80,000 and no kids, or maybe one kid, maybe that's middle class. And I don't know, I'm not trying to define the middle class, but fundamentally, when asked to define the middle class, this Trudeau government can't and won't. And that's noteworthy. HuffPost is reporting. Asked to define middle class, Trudeau says Canadians know. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau offered a brief response Tuesday when asked to define who he considers middle class in Canada. Canadians know who's in the middle class and know what their families are facing, and we focus more on the actual issues, the Prime Minister said during an interview with Breakfast Television in Toronto, without actually defining any of the issues. Right? Trudeau's unelaborated answer comes weeks after naming a new federal minister of middle-class prosperity. Since coming to power in 2015, Trudeau has repeatedly said his government is focused on the middle class and those working hard to join it. But his pick for the role has also struggled to define the term inherent to her job title. Quote, I define the middle class where people feel they can afford their way of life, explained Ottawa Vanier MP Mona Fortier during an interview on The Current last month. They have quality of life and they can ... send their kids to play hockey or even have different activities. Oh, hockey and karate? You middle class creature, you. Back to the article. The minister's mandate letter, released last week, failed to offer any clarity on who is considered middle class in Canada. Among Fortier's responsibilities include the development of cross-governmental approaches to ensuring that prosperity and quality of life of the middle class are central to government policymaking. What does that mean? I would like her to just define that. What does that mean to her? Please, Minister, reach out. I'd love for you to tell me what that means to you. Former Conservative Minister Joe Oliver once suggested that families who earn up to $120,000 in annual income are considered middle class. Finance Minister Bill Morneau responded to an order on paper question in 2017 by saying Canada doesn't have a statistical measure to help categorize who is part of the socioeconomic group and who isn't. Quote, the government of Canada defines the middle class using a broader set of characteristics than merely income, Morneau said in the House on January 30th, 2017. He suggested the term to be more reliant on ideological markers than economic. Middle class values are values that are common to most Canadians and from all backgrounds. They believe in working hard to get ahead and hope for a better future for their children, he said, aspiring to adequate housing and healthcare, educational opportunities for their children, a secure retirement, job security, and modest spending on leisure pursuits are other traits that are commonly among this group, Morneau added. Talk about vague. Like, how not to define a group of people. You know, they've got a job and they can afford what they're doing, and, you know, they've got a retirement. I know my kids won't be able to afford a house. What kind of garbage are you talking about, sir? Like, a house in Canada at this point in time, if my kid was 20 years old right now, he would not be able to afford a house. And I talked about this a lot during the election because of the bad Liberal policies. So I don't know what this Mr. Morneau is not talking honestly about the financial situation in Canada. Back to this. Quote, it is not possible to pin down a specific income range that would capture everyone who's in the middle class and exclude everyone who is not. Oh, we couldn't possibly answer this question. You know, it's too complicated. So we're just going to create policies around this complicated thing that we can't answer. Despite lacking a firm definition of who makes the nebulous group, the government has continued to use the term generously. Middle class was mentioned 10 times in Morneau's update. So it's up to you, I guess. Do you think this government is talking out of both sides of its mouth? Do you think they're telling the truth? Do you think that not being able to define the middle class is a good idea? Do you think that rationing systems are a good idea? I don't. I don't at all. I think it's a terrible idea, and I'm very, very frustrated with this government because it just seems like everything they do is a misstep. Everything. And it doesn't seem like anybody cares. So what are you going to do? Keep ranting at my microphone. That's what I'll do. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com and have a wonderful, wonderful